Hey, Natalie, welcome to the His and Her Money
Hey,
Show.
Natalie.
Hi there. How are you guys?
We are
Awesome.
doing great. We're glad to have you here with us for this episode because you have an incredible story of paying off a bunch of debt that we know is going to inspire everybody that's tuned in today. But before we get into your awesome story, can you just take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody and let them know what you're all about?
Yeah, so my name's Natalie Patka. I'm in the Midwest, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Um, I am super passionate about money, and my story may be a little different. There's a lot of tragedy and pain, but I feel so blessed to be where I am today, and I hope this will reach somebody out there.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's talk about your debt. How much debt in total, and how much have you paid off, and what type of debt was it?
Yeah, so this makes me feel sick to even say, but we were $197,000 in debt. And that was about $150,000 of student loan debt. That was car debt. That was credit card debt. Um, yeah, it was terrible. Our student loans were like a mortgage to us. It was so sickening. I was going to say, and we actually paid all that stuff off. So it feels so good to say that, and it makes me a little emotional because it's so much money.
It
Yeah, it's a
is.
lot. Yeah, how long
It's
did it take you
huge.
guys?
So it took it. So me and my husband have been married for 3.5 years, and last September we actually paid it off. But for us, I'll talk about this later. But some of it was inheritance money that we received. But so about 3.5 years we paid it all off.
Wow, incredible. Now, let's rewind the tape just a little bit because you guys were going along and you had your student loans, your car loans, and so did everybody else
Yeah.
here. It's no big deal to a lot of
Hmm.
people, but something happened with you and your husband where you guys had a moment there where you came to the conclusion that although your debt was quote unquote typical, it was not something that you wanted to be in your life anymore. So talk about what caused you all to have that moment to even want to get out of debt in the first place.
Yeah. So before we were married, I was in grad school. So I went to school for architecture. I was in school for actually 8 years, even more pathetic. Lots of money. But so about a month before I was getting ready to graduate, I thought, ooh, I better start looking at all these loans. I was taking the maximum out, just to live. And I went to in-state school, but it was still so expensive. And so about a month before I landed my first job. So I knew my salary. And so I just started going through, almost like a budget, and just, I had no idea how much student loan debt I was in. Because people told me, you'll pay it off, you'll get a good job, it's not a big deal. And so that night, I was up all night, and my roommates can attest to this because I even got kind of angry. And I was up all night, and I saw that I was over 6 figures in student loan debt. And I thought, oh my word, how am I going to live like this? I'm going to be working for the rest of my life just to pay off the student loan. And so that was the moment I had this like aha, like, I mean, I almost hit like depression. And at the time, my husband now, but he was my boyfriend, I told him how much I was in, and he had a minor freak out. But I mean, he obviously stayed with me. But I think that was the point. I even called my mom crying, like, why did you guys let me do this? And she felt terrible. And she's like, you'll get it. And that night I just like cried out to God, and I said, I don't know if I'm going to land this amazing, I just accepted a job and I was so thankful for it. But the amount of money I was making, there's no way I could pay that off very soon. So that was like my first cry out to God. Like, I made so many bad decisions. Like, help me out of this. And that's when I slowed down, and I did. So when I was 20 years old, my mom had made me take the Dave Ramsey class at church. Um, And at the time, I wasn't really dealing with that amount of debt, so you kind of only listen to, I think sometimes you only relate stories to yourself in that moment. And at that point, I had no debt, so I didn't really take as much of it as I could. But at this moment, I did that debt snowball, and I had student loans from A to N, and it was sickening.
Now, you talked about the fact that your boyfriend, now husband, he kind of freaked out, but he stuck around. But there had to be a lot of conversation around this topic because it couldn't have been an easy thing for him to swallow, and it wasn't an easy thing for you to talk about once you realized the amount of your student loan. So help that person that's listening right now to where they're and their spouse are not seeing eye to eye about the debt situation. You all have to have, I'm sure, a slew of conversations to figure out a plan of attack. So talk about the communication process there.
Well, at first, I tend to be a little neurotic, and he was kind of under the impression, we'll figure this out together. He had bought a $95,000 house, so I was glad he had a cheaper house. But there has been so many fights about money, and now I can say we're over that hump. But man, it was difficult, and the communication, I had to show him numbers. Oh, it was terrible. And he was actually pretty optimistic. On the other hand, I was freaking out. But it just took lots of budgets together and lots of talking out of how are we going to tackle this.
Awesome. So talk about the mindset that you had to put yourself in to say, you know what, I'm going to knock out this debt.
Yeah, well, so he had just bought a new truck, and I was like, yeah, I know. He's still driving that, by the way. It's paid off now, but at that point, I was like, you got to sell the truck. Even Dave Ramsey would say, you better sell that truck. And let me just tell you, this is how bad I was. So I had bought a $12,000 car using my student loan. So I took a loan for a loan. And I'm sure there's some people out there in school who've done the same thing, right? You've gone on these vacations. I was going on vacations too. I paid twice for them, but but yeah, it was tough, and it was a lot of fights. Let me just tell you that, tons of fights between us. But just knowing that I didn't want to live like this anymore, we started getting really tight on our budget. We wanted a new house, but I was like, we're going to live in this $95,000 house as long as we can to pay this stuff off.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you guys really tightened up the budget, lots of money talks. And you also kind of alluded to some tough things that took place earlier that also helped in the process of getting out of debt. So kind of outline all of the practical tips, strategies, and even, the rest of the circumstances that helped you all become debt free.
Yeah, so going back, so we had gotten married, and again, we had gotten a credit card to pay for our wedding. Terrible, terrible decision. So just add it to the American dream, right? All that debt. And so I had sat down after we were married, and I did the debt snowball with all of our debt. So that included his truck that he loved, my car that was a loan on a loan. Terrible idea. So I sat down, and it was a Saturday, and I was there for 8 hours just calculating. Okay, if we get rid of cable and put this towards our lowest one, we can pay things off this much sooner. And so I think the moment that we are like, okay, we can do this, is our debt was supposed to be like 20 years long. My student loans were so high that they were on a 20-year repayment plan. Terrible. Yeah, it was terrible. And so after I spent that whole 8 hours that day, I realized we could pay off everything, including that $95,000 house, in 7 years. And I think at that moment, we both saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and we were thinking, this isn't so bad. If we just focus, we stay in this house, we pay this stuff off. I couldn't get him to sell the truck, but we'll talk about that later. But so at that moment, we were just snowballing. And I remember, so we followed the steps. So we saved that $1,000, which at first was hard. We each got some fun money, cash. We used to fight about what each other would buy at, like, for instance, Target. Or he has an obsession with fishing and hunting, and we would be all over each other, like, why did you buy this? I'm sure so many married couples can relate to that. So we finally started, actually writing out the budget and going over it every month. And that was hard. Lots of fights. We didn't necessarily agree. At the end, we did. But so that's the writing out the budget is so big when you are trying to pay stuff off. And people say, oh, we're on a budget, but they don't write anything down. And it's so hard to see where you're spending the money unless you do that. So anyway, so we're encouraged. We're going 2 years. I think we ended up paying like $40,000 off. We paid off that first credit card, that $8,000 for our wedding. That was the best feeling. We had a furnace that went out, and we could just pay cash for that out of our emergency fund. So it was the best feeling. But about 2 years in, I like to call this the tragedy moment. So I get a call, and sorry, I get a little emotional about this because it's so real. I get a call, and I'm at work, just hustling and hustling. And they said, your dad has been in an accident at work. We don't think he's going to make it. And so I hustle up about an hour and a half, and here, let me breathe. Because this is a good, important story, and I want people to know this. So, long story short, he ends up dying that day. And I didn't get to say goodbye, and there was a lot of hurt, and he was such a good dad. And so, okay, I'm going to get through this story. Yeah, it's a little emotional to me because I still think about him every day. Anyway, so he passes, and so growing up, we were middle to lower class. He was a truck driver. He never made a lot of money. And my mom was a nurse, but he was adamant. He lived pretty simply, I have to say. And from that day, he had put, money away for his 401k. And when he died, I'll never forget, that was like the first time my mom had been financially free, and she always preached about debt-free living. She was such a strong Christian woman. And actually, a year before they died, before he died, they actually paid off their house. And that was so encouraging because they had a different vibe about them. There was true freedom. And so when he died, my mom, obviously it was rough for our whole family. It was a huge shock. So tragedy one. So that impacted me, and I was just like, okay, I got to get out of debt. It just pushed me a little more because I saw how he was able to pass on that money to my mother and how free she was. So then tragedy 2 hits. And not even a year after my dad died, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And so they basically said, you have cancer, it's incurable, you got 5 to 6 months to live. And I thought, Lord, what is happening? And she was such a woman of faith, and I will never forget. She just gets diagnosed, and this is the critical point in my story personally. She had trusted God with everything, and she had prayed about her finances. She was going to a charismatic church, one that believes in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And this is huge. So once she got diagnosed with cancer, my dad's no longer in the picture. I thought, I'm not going to lose my mom to this either. So I started attending this church with her. It was life-changing. Even in her life, her finances totally changed once she started giving a little more. It was inspiring. So there was a moment right after she got diagnosed. I went to this charismatic church with her, and they were, so this is in 2015, no, 2016. So just last year. She just died actually a year ago tomorrow. So it's kind of, the timing's really bittersweet to me. But I went to this church with her, and they were talking about the year of the Jubilee and how you're supposed to sow your seed. And at that point, I've never felt the Holy Spirit more in my life than in that moment. And I remembered it was a Saturday, and I had called my husband. I just felt the Holy Spirit tell me, like, they said, pray for whatever you want. It can be crazy because God is big enough for that. And so obviously the first thing I prayed for was a healing for my mom from this incurable cancer. And the other thing I prayed for was the student debt that was just pulling me down to be released. And in that moment, I just heard God say, you're going to be taken care of. And so I gave everything in my bank account that night. It was crazy. So we didn't have that much money because we were living, tight. But I called my husband. I said, you can't spend anything because I just gave it all. And he was mad. He was like, we're like, we trust in God with everything. So he thought I was crazy. And in that moment, I was like, oh no, does that mean I'm only going to get the stuff paid off because my mom's going to die? That's how I'm going to pay the stuff off? And I instantly rebuked it. No, I don't want that money if that means she's going to be gone. And so anyways, move forward a little bit. I actually care for my mom during her cancer, and it was 5 months, and then she passed away. And and I'll never forget, she told me, you guys will be taken care of. You guys will be taken care of, but I want you to tithe 10% of that money, have fun with it, give it to people, and pay off all your debt. And so, I had no idea how much money we were going to get. They didn't really have their finances figured out till later in life. So, I thought, oh, I might just get a little chunk of money. Awesome. Despite all the pain, that's a blessing, And so I had my debt snowball, and I get this money, and we just start going down the list. I'm sorry, can you guys hear me okay? Woo! Woo! So I just start going down the list, and we pay off every single thing. And I was at work in the corner, and I'll never forget, I'm just paying off these crazy amounts of student loans. And I'm crying in the corner, just going down the list, paying these things off that I'm like, God, wow. Despite all this pain, I trust you in everything. And so I feel like God sped up my process, but I hope the message is still the same. It was crazy to me, and still today it's still really crazy, the last 2 years of my life with my dad and my mom. But man, we were provided for.
Policy Genius guarantees the best life insurance price for you and those you love. It's so simple to protect your family today in 5 easy steps. 1. Calculate quotes. 2. Compare companies. 3. Apply online. 4. Receive expert advice. And 5. Rest easy. It really is that simple. Calculate, compare, apply with Policy Genius. For more info, head on over to hisandhermoney.com/Policy Genius.
Obstacles come in lots of different forms for different people. And the obstacles that you had to jump over and walk through are, wow, mind-blowing, to go back-to-back years like that. First your dad, then your mom. A lot of people are up against obstacles of a different sort on their journeys to debt freedom. what would you say helped you fight through those obstacles, and not because you could have just said, you know what, this is too much. Let's just stop what we're doing. Let's, just handle this. We'll worry about this debt thing later. But you guys kept moving forward in both situations. What do you think was it that kept you moving forward through the obstacles?
I think there's something about debt, and even I know Dave Ramsey speaks to this too. There's almost like this there's like this thing holding you down when you're carrying all that debt. It's not true freedom. And I think just knowing like how my mom had gotten out of debt and the way she was, it inspired me and my husband so much. And we thought, that's how we want to be. We don't want to be, with all the pain and trials that everyone goes through. Having debt will just keep you even lower than you already are feeling. It's a terrible feeling.
Absolutely.
So true.
Absolutely.
Wow, her story was so touching. I'm like trying not to cry because I can't find tissue and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm like, man, but your story, my gosh, it's like you said, there was pain even amongst you losing. I mean, I'm a daddy's girl. I can't even imagine that, and my mother was just diagnosed last August with breast cancer. We believe in God for her healing, but after hearing your story and how you said that your parents, they didn't make a lot of money, but they started to, make sure that they did right by their money. And now how you were able to, just reap some of their diligence. They were able to leave a legacy to you. But even amidst all of that, you didn't have to take that money and pay off your debt. So many people get inheritances and they go on vacations, they totally blow it. And you took that money and you paid off your debt. And I'm sure that your parents would be extremely proud to know that. They would be extremely proud to know that that's amazing. It's just amazing. I'm almost speechless. I don't even know how to come after this or what to say. But
to that point, talk about the lesson or what your story says about the importance of leaving a financial legacy for the next generation.
It is huge. And I have to say, so if I would look back 10 years ago, my mom didn't actually, she even said once, okay, here's a strong Christian lady. She even said, oh, you guys won't get that much. We don't have anything. And I'll never forget that. I thought, oh, that's terrible. But man, when you are going through pain and loss, like it even says in the Bible, like, I don't even know the verse, but it talks about people leave an inheritance for your kids, basically. I can tell you, I feel like we broke chains. So there's 3 of us kids. The moment we each paid off all of our debt, it was like chains were broken from this generation. And my mom was actually, sorry, I keep blowing my nose too here, sorry. My mom actually was a deliverance minister. And so she would talk about generational sin and how, Satan will come in and try to take your family. Some people don't ever struggle with finances. Some people struggle with other things. But I felt like this was always a struggle over our family, and I remember towards the end, once she really, I feel like hit her spiritual, she just got it. I'll never forget her saying, God wants you to live a good life. He doesn't want you to be living paycheck to paycheck. And when she was dying, she said, pay off your debt. And I'll never forget that because it's such a huge, it's just amazing. Yeah, it is amazing. And I still am amazed by her faith. I think about her and my dad every day, but her faith was on another level that I aspire to be.
Wow. So you're saying that at one point your parents felt like it was just a little, but by the time it was all said and done, your parents left an inheritance that not only paid off your debt, but your siblings' debt as well?
Yeah. There's 3 of us. And obviously, everything, we have a really good family. Me and my siblings all are like best friends. but we are all able to take that money and pay it all off, and it's pretty incredible. I won't speak for my sister, but I'll say, like, I still carry a mortgage. They're mortgage free, so they're completely debt free, and that's the most amazing thing. I carry this thing called a student loan, that took most of my inheritance, but I just think it's crazy, and we feel, I think God, we believed in pure healing for my mom, but I think she was ready to go home, and I think this was almost her clearing our generation, like I said, of this financial poverty, and it makes me excited for my children. I'm pregnant now. But yeah, thank you. See, and that's another gift. I always used to say, when I had that student loan, I said, we're never going to be able to have kids because there's no way I could ever, I'm paying so much on student loans. I was paying double my mortgage on student loans. And I thought, there's no way. And actually, it was like 6 months after she died, I found out I was pregnant. So it's just kind of crazy.
Take us back to that moment where you just experienced the pain of the loss of mom, and you talked about how you're in the corner just going down the list. Talk to us about everything surrounding all that, and take us to the moment where you made that very last debt payment.
Yeah. So I was at work, and the moment, some of that inheritance got deposited in my account, I was like, oh, Lord have mercy. I don't even want to see that. I want to start paying things off. So I was at work. So I started, and I think I paid off like 5 different things. Granted, we had 23 on the list. So I just started the little thing at work. I started paying off 5, and I think the total was like 27,000 or something crazy. And then that night, I was texting my husband the whole day, like, tonight's the night. And so we are sitting on the couch, and we are just going through payment. And, every time I was doing this, I couldn't help but think of my parents. Like, this was their hard work, and this is God's blessing on us. So the last payment we made was my husband's truck, which he got to keep only because we were able to pay it off. Otherwise, that sucker would have been sold. But in a way, it was almost like we were a little numb because it was more than we could ever imagine paying off in one sitting. And so the moment we paid that off, we were like, what do we do now? Like, did that all just happen today? And it was amazing. I felt like a load was off my plate. It was crazy.
So how does life feel now? The time has gone by a little bit. You've been out of debt for a little bit now. Talk about life now compared to that moment where you first wrote the debt snowball and you saw all this student loan debt. Compare life then and life now.
Oh, my word. I feel like there's just a weight. Like I said, I feel lighter. So this is kind of exciting to me, but yesterday my car got hit. My little G6 that I still drive. And for the first time, I'm not even stressed about it, not worried about it. We have our car fund for my next car there. That's, it's like the little stuff that we would normally panic about is gone. And for the first time, so this is the stuff I get excited about. I actually decided to take a year off of work. So I'm, after all that pain with my parents, we've had the finances for me to take a year off. And so we just bought a new house. I'm prepping for the baby, I'm getting the house ready, and it's amazing. I'm following some passions for a little bit, and it just gets me excited. I feel like I can follow those passions because I'm not stuck to my 8 to 5 right now, and I will go back to work. It's just to have this moment and be my age is so freeing. I just feel like nothing can stop me almost,
Debt freedom gives you options, and that's one thing that we teach and we scream out loud and we preach out loud for people to become debt free, because it gives you options. I was able to come home when I was pregnant with our second, and if we had debt, there's no way in the world I would have been able to come home, because I was making more at the time. My salary was more. So it's just a blessing to be able to say, wow, you can come home and just take your time and get the house ready and things like that. I love it. I love that. I love your story.
Like, I think this is what living is supposed to be like, And I wish people, yeah, do I want a $30,000 car? Sure I do, but it's not worth it to me at this point. I told my husband, obviously we don't have any car debt, but my car's getting old and it's a 2-door, so he said we should probably get a 4-door with the baby. But I only want like a $5,000 car. I think I'm crazy. But it's funny, once you start that cash flow and you see that in the bank, you're very cautious of what you spend it on.
Absolutely, for sure. So what would you say is the biggest life lesson that you learned during this entire journey?
I would say debt is a dream crusher. If you want to throw away your dreams, go get yourself in debt. That's the rule, I would say. I just think it's a totally different lifestyle. And it's so much more freeing than all that crap in that new car you got sitting in your driveway. It's amazing to be this way.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, we love to tell people to read as a tool to get out of debt. Do you have any book recommendations that you would recommend to the people listening to help them in their journeys to financial freedom?
Well, I'm obviously a huge Dave Ramsey person. I just taught my first Dave Ramsey class at the work that I was at. And so I would say any of his books are so good, so the Total Money Makeover, that would be a great one. I'm sure tons of people say that. But he gets to the point, and he doesn't sugarcoat it. Like, I always hear a lot of people saying they don't want to get out of debt because they'd rather invest it right now. I hate that advice. You're not guaranteed 50 years on this earth. You're not guaranteed any kind of time. So live debt-free while you're here.
Love that.
Absolutely.
Love that. So talk to that person right now who needs a little bit of encouragement. They may be on the debt-free journey, but kind of getting a little weary here, like, oh, should I just give up and just throw in the towel? What would you say to them?
Oh, I would say focus, honey, or sir, whoever you are. There's a different life out there, and there's no amount of debt or cars or stuff that will ever be equal to your life debt-free. And so keep hustling, work those extra jobs, find a side passion, make some money in it. I would just say hustle, because the reward at the end is so much greater than all that stuff.
Wow. Amazing. Your story from start to finish might be one of the most inspirational stories that we've had on the show. This is probably
the only one I've cried on.
So we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for taking time to relive everything and share your heart with our audience today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, audience, for crying.
Oh, it's okay.